Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin with a simple question. What is vanity? Not the shallow cliché, not the cartoon caricature of someone staring lovingly into a mirror. I'm speaking of the true essence of vanity, the quiet hunger, the restless longing, the psychological machinery beneath the polished image. Vanity, in its most distilled form, is the desire to be seen, not merely observed. It is the craving to be validated, admired, and confirmed as significant. This longing is neither inherently evil nor inherently noble. It is a human impulse, wired into our socio-biological architecture. But like all impulses, it has a shadow. As both a philosopher and a psychiatrist, I've witnessed vanity in two worlds, in theory and in the raw, trembling reality of the human mind. And I've learnt that vanity is more complex than our moral traditions want to admit. Vanity is the child of insecurity, but also the sister of ambition. It can destroy a life, yet it can also propel someone to greatness. It is a mask we polish, because we fear the world would reject the face beneath it. Let me take you deeper in classical philosophy. Vanity appears mostly as a vice. The Stoics warned that the desire for applause ensnares the soul in the chains of public opinion. Christian theologians equated vanity with pride, a sin of seeing oneself above others, or desiring glory that belongs only to God. But here's the paradox. Human beings are inherently social creatures. We learn who we are through the reflections offered by other people. Our value systems, our roles, our identities, they are constructed in relation to others. So is vanity really a sin? Or is it simply the misalignment of a natural desire? I argue the latter. True vanity is not the desire to be loved. It is the obsession with appearing worthy of love, even at the cost of authenticity. Vanity is a fixation on the image of the self rather than the self itself. It is the philosophy of surfaces. Indie clinic. Vanity rarely looks glamorous. It looks anxious. It looks fragile. It looks like a woman who curls her hair 3 times before leaving the house because she fears that anything less than perfect will make her invisible. It looks like a man who hides his failures behind exaggerated stories. It looks like a teenager who refreshes their social media feed 50 times a day. Vanity. Underneath the gold paint is often fear. Fear of insignificance. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of being overlooked in a world overflowing with competing narratives. Most people imagine vanity as arrogance, but clinically, it is more often a coping mechanism, constructed armor to defend a tender, wounded identity. Some individuals become vain not because they think too highly of themselves, but because they fear they are not enough. And so vanity becomes a self-medication, temporary, intoxicating, addictive. There is something profoundly symbolic about the mirror. It is the object most often tied to vanity, yet the mirror is also a site of revelation. When a person stands before it, they confront 2 versions of themselves, the external self that the world sees, and the internal self they carry within. People with high vanity are trapped between these 2 versions. They curate the external self so meticulously that the internal becomes neglected, malnourished, and eventually estranged. This disconnection from oneself creates psychological distress. It becomes difficult to feel genuine emotions, difficult to form intimate relationships, difficult to accept imperfection. Vanity whispers, be admired, but the self whispers, be known. And these 2 whispers rarely harmonize. We must also acknowledge that vanity does not grow in a vacuum. It is fertilized by culture. Modern societies relentlessly reward appearance, physical beauty, Material display, social status, digital presence. We live in an era where image has become currency. What once required character now often requires a curated aesthetic. Vanity today is systemic. You see it in the influencer who transforms her life into a performance. You see it in the politician who prioritizes optics over truth. You see it in the everyday person comparing their authentic life to someone else's. Highlight reel. In a culture that values spectacle, vanity becomes a survival strategy. Dark side. When vanity consumes the self of all psychological states, vanity is among the most deceptive. It disguises itself as confidence, strength, elegance, ambition. But its true nature is dependence on external validation. When vanity deepens into pathology, we see narcissistic tendencies, obsessive self-monitoring, emotional volatility tied to praise or criticism, superficial relationships built on utility rather than intimacy. Identity, confusion, depressive episodes when admiration fades. The vain person is not simply someone who loves themselves too much. Often, they do not love themselves at all. They love the avatar they have created. But here is the part most people forget. Vanity has a healthy form. A small degree of vanity is self-respect wearing its best dress. It motivates hygiene, confidence, personal ambition, and the desire to present oneself well. A little vanity supports mental health, particularly in individuals recovering from years of neglect or low self-esteem. Healthy vanity says, I care about how I show up in the world, but my worth is not dependent on it. Unhealthy vanity says, if I am not admired, I am nothing. The difference between the two is the difference between nourishment and addiction. The treatment for vanity is not humility, it is integration. It is the process of reconnecting the outer image with the inner truth. It requires a person to sit with their flaws, to recognize their insecurities without shame, and to learn the courage of authenticity.
Throughout history, philosophers have wrestled with the tension between self-love and self-destruction. Gnosticism, named after the myths of Narcissus, who gazed endlessly at his own reflection, is more than vanity, it's a warning. It shows us what happens when self-awareness collapses into self-obsession. Philosophically, narcissism is often seen as a spiral, the ego feeding itself, cut off from the world, mistaking the mirror for reality. It's a trap where confidence turns into arrogance and reflection becomes isolation. Yet, the lesson isn't to reject the self entirely. Self-awareness is vital, it's how we grow, how we understand our place in the world. The danger lies in tipping too far, in mistaking the image of ourselves for the truth of who we are. So the challenge, as thinkers from ancient Greece to modern psychology remind us, is balance. To cultivate strength without worshipping it, to embrace beauty without being consumed by it, to build muscle, yes, but also to build meaning. True authenticity comes not from staring at our own reflection, but from stepping beyond it, engaging with others, and living a life that radiates outward instead of folding inward. In the end, Gnosticism is a mirror. The question is, do we get lost in the reflection, or do we use it to see ourselves more clearly and then turn back to the world with purpose?